Hey, my name is Rachael Sampson from Borrowing Tape, and I'm here with Emily Mkrtichian to talk to her about her latest documentary, There Was Not, which follows the lives of four feminist heroines from Artsakh before, during, and after the genocide and war in 2020. Emily, welcome and thank you for sitting down with me today. Congrats. This documentary is so affecting and important, not only from the perspective of education, but for immortalizing Artsakh's history and memory, which brings me to my first question. When you began filming this documentary about these inspiring women, I'm sure you never imagined you'd also be capturing a war. What did the blueprints of your original film look like, and how does that compare to the final cut that we see today?
Yeah, first of all, just so grateful to you for wanting to have this conversation and for watching the film. What a beautiful intro. Um, Originally, when I started making the film, which I'm always surprised to say was almost 10 years ago, I started in 2016. It began after making a short film about the first group of women in Artsakh who were allowed to go out as deminers. So their work was to go into minefields and dig up bombs from the war 25 years ago to make sure people could be safe and not accidentally step on one. And with them, I just kind of got um I was just inspired by the complexity of these women. I had originally thought of them as kind of feminist figures, but once I spent time with them, I realized they were actually these like very embedded members of their families and their communities, and they were doing dangerous work to keep their families safe, to provide for their families. They were all single mothers, and they really believed in the way that they could work for their community. So there's kind of this complexity in this post-conflict situation that I hadn't expected or was very intrigued by. Um, and then so I'm a member of the Armenian diaspora, and my great grandparents were kind of disconnected from their lands 2 generations back. And all of the time I spent in Artsakh really um, it just showed me these people had this really intense connection to this place that I felt was really missing from my life through my history of displacement. Like I never really grew up feeling connected to the US or to America. And there was this kind of like fervent desire to be there and experience the place and show it to other people that really drew me in. So, working from those kinds of moments of curiosity and personal connection, I found these four different women through different means. Some of them were friends of friends, some of them I encountered um, like doing work in Artsakh or just spending time there. And I wanted to work with them to actually create these like large scale installation pieces that were based on the stories that they were telling about themselves, which were kind of in stark contrast to the stories that their communities were telling about them. So originally the film was that kind of observational verite piece that kind of hinged on a creative act. Um, and then, of course, in 2020, everything changed.
Wow. It must have been incredibly difficult to see the subjects of your film go through such an unimaginable loss. We were able to witness that grief within the work, but how did that affect you personally? What was your mental health like during and after this process?
Oh, it's always that's such a hard question to answer because so much of this film is like subsuming myself to the work of watching and supporting. And I think there was never a lot of time for me to like reflect on my own um experience and engagement. I remember like when people would ask me about the war, I always give anecdotes involving the four women in the film and something that happened to us. Um, I think that making this film was a way for me to attempt to make some sense out of the things that I witnessed. I grew up in the US. I grew up in a very safe place. I'm not a journalist who's been exposed to conflict or trained for those situations. So filming during such a dangerous armed conflict was a very new and life-changing experience for me. Um, and kind of understanding what it's really like to be on the ground in those situations, which unfortunately right now are not original, are not something that are taking place around the world. They're horrific. Um, and I think this film, in the way that it allows the viewer to understand my relationship to these women through the camera, through our own conversation and dialogue. I think it tries to address that, um, what it's like to have something like this happen to you, and then also witness something like this. Um, So, yeah, I don't know. I guess I always think about there's also something about this. I was having a conversation this morning with someone about um this is also for me, it's something that I know that my generations past, like in my own lineage, have experienced. And so it was also kind of a full circle moment for me to think about like the experience of my great grandparents, and what they passed down to me. And as now someone who's becoming like the storyteller, the transmitter of information, what I want to pass on, whether that be a film or a story to my child, or something that I share with a friend.
As this is such a precious personal film, which took 6 years to make and is shot with a very empathetic and caring lens, how did you find taking on the festival circuit, which can be rather competitive?
Um, wow, these are such great questions because I'm just like in the middle of reflecting on all of these things. There's something very strange that happens when a personal creative work goes out into the world. Number one, there's a distancing between the thing that you have been in the process of making for so long, and then it as an object that is seen externally by other people. And then there's also the moment where that object enters an industry or a machine. And there are all sorts of structures in place that have nothing to do with your personal experience of making the work. And you have to start to navigate. Um, so there was a lot of really beautiful moments um, as this film was making its way out into the world. I premiered it when I was, I think, 7 months pregnant, and had one of the women from the film at my side the whole time. We had a bottle of wine that was made from grapes that were grown on the soil in Artsakh, and we said toasts to each other. When it premiered in Armenia at the National International Film Festival there, I brought my 2-month-old across the world and we did it together. And all the women were able to come to the screening, and it was recognized with these really beautiful awards. So there's kind of, even in the release of this film, there's been a real mingling of the personal and the professional. And I've really tried to just allow that to happen. And also to kind of brace myself for a really unknown process of the way a piece of artwork, a creative work, kind of navigate something that feels very separate from it, which is awards, press, theatrical openings. Like all of these things that we're doing are all very new to me. And I'm just trying to do it with like the way that the four women in the film would be proud of, like with people I trust, with people that have the right ethics and that I want to collaborate with family, with community. All of that has been really important.
One of the biggest takeaways for me was the pockets of wisdom and the amount of little throwaway comments that these women would make that actually have so much weight. And the one that sticks out in my mind the most is when Siranush says, "We have to stay beautiful no matter what." And that got me thinking about how women have so much grace within them that even in the face of war, we are able to carry ourselves with resilience and strength. And that's overwhelmingly admirable and not often reflected within masculinity. And I wanted to know if there was a specific quote or a small moment from the film that goes around your head that you keep unpacking because it's so much bigger than intended.
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, to that comment, I think what a beautiful observation, because again, I really think of people in my family when I think of that comment. And there's a moment where Siranush is actually having to pack up her stuff and flee because the bombing has gotten so bad. And she's like, doesn't matter, you got to make your bed, you got to get everything tidy, you got to keep everything in place. And I really identify that with that, like in my own family of like, it doesn't matter if you don't have enough money. It doesn't matter what the situation is. Like you hold your head up and you do things with integrity and dignity. And I think there's something really important in that no matter the circumstances or the way that the outside world might see you, like you internally hold your head high. And I really see Siranush doing that. I see women as really like the holders of that, and the reminders of that. I learned that from my grandma, from my aunts. And I think that it's yeah, it's like a stubborn internal insistence on the dignity of your existence, despite what anything around you might say or the world might throw at you. As far as other things that I think about a lot in the film, there's so many. Maybe what I think, just again from maybe a conversation this morning, is a kind of funny comment by Sose in the beginning when she's training this group of young kids in judo, and she's kind of going through the main tenets that are not always like about physical strength. They're often about internal, mental, spiritual strength. And she's talking about how the pain of the body is fleeting and it can kind of be alchemized into something else. Um, and I think about that a lot. I kind of actually go back to her like spiritual tenets a lot because I think so say in the film and in real life is such a strong person, and kind of unwavering. Like I see myself as someone I kind of change my mind a lot. I really go with the flow. I'm kind of in the air a lot. And Sose is just like, you could show up 10 years ago and 10 years into the future, and she'll tell you the exact same thing about what she thinks and what she believes. And I just have a really great respect for that. Like her entire world was ripped out from under her, and she hasn't lost hope and she hasn't lost her belief.
You were able to juxtapose these horrific and heavy themes with a sororal and gentle demeanor, and that's clear in the footage and even in the edit, all of which results in a very powerful film. The awful, kind of heavy themes of war, genocide, were kind of contrasted with the way you executed the documentary with just so
Yeah.
much care. Was that a conscious decision?
Yeah. Yeah, it was really intentional on a lot of levels. The first being that, and maybe this is because I had been filming for so many years before the war broke out, but being very insistent that this actually is not a film about war. Like, war happens to the four women, the four main characters, but it's not a film about war. It's not about war defining their lives. Um, the first 40 minutes of the film are really kind of an ode to this place, like this really uh aesthetically striking, kind of fervently joyful, very unique country, and the people who live there. There's despite the fact that you kind of see each of the women in the beginning of the film struggling against something that they would like to change or for something that they would like to achieve, there's this backdrop of just a simple joy that kind of runs through everything. And that's what I remember about that place. And it was really important to me that the film that wasn't an aside, that it wasn't just a footnote in the history of this place. Like that is the definition of this place. And so that plus my real lived relationship to these four women and the difficulty that I had in holding a camera through some of these moments, I think was also an access point to something that could counter what you do see in the film, which is some horrific destruction. But what I saw those women doing was creating relationships of support and care. And in a way, my kind of intermingled existence in the film as the filmmaker is a mirror for that, is a mirror for the way that they care for the people around them. Um, and I hope it helps you understand that these are not simply for victims of a tragedy. I really didn't want this film to be asking for sympathy for these four women because what I really believe is that they have so much to teach us. We're living in a time where we're seeing so much conflict and mass displacement. And, you don't know where that's going to happen next. There's so much uncertainty in our lives. And the fact that these four women could experience what they experienced and continue to wake up the next day, continuing to say, how can I be of service to my family? How can I be of service to my community? Um, that is just, it's such a model of strength for all of us.
Now that the film has been seen by select crowds prior to its main release, and we can often learn so much more from the audience, have you received any standout feedback that's made you consider the work in a different way?
Mm. Ugh, I love these questions so much. I think actually what I was startled by or surprised by or like pleasantly surprised by is you kind of like toil away on this thing in isolation for a bunch of years. I was really lucky to have an incredible editor, Alexandria Bombach, who I think just so clearly saw what I wanted to do. Um, and was a struggle to do, which is to make make a piece that could somehow be cathartic, could could offer the idea of a story or storytelling or documentation and relationships as an antidote to what we were seeing and what we witnessed. And I think I've been like just so um, wonderfully surprised by how that just comes through in the film, and how people come up to me afterward and really kind of understand that from this piece. Like your questions really show it. It's complete magic and alchemy that you can work towards something like that in subtle ways, and that it can be just legible in the work that you make. It's vulnerable and it's beautiful, and it really like gives me so much respect for this medium that that's possible. Um, the other thing that I've been like very humbled by is that, especially with Armenian audiences or Armenian or audiences from this region, like from the Middle East, from the Swana region, when they watch it, I often get the comment that, like, in particular with people who know about Artsakh, like, since this happened, I've spent so much time trying not to think about it because it's so painful. And this film gave me this kind of 2 hour stretch of time where I could like relive that place, and I could see the beauty of it again. And I could watch what happened in a community with other people in a theater and kind of have this cathartic experience. And I think that has actually been really helpful for us to be able to witness it in this way, and then kind of sit in a theater together and have a discussion about it. Something about that has also done, like within my community, has worked a little bit of magic.
You mentioned before that you are now a mother. Congratulations. I have a slightly similar question, which is, has motherhood had an influence on the way you now view and create art? And has this life-changing experience impacted your perception of the film at all?
Yeah, absolutely. I got pregnant. Um I was like pregnant in the edit. And that experience gave me this kind of unique obsession with an idea of transmission. Um I was thinking about how, experiences like the war and the ethnic cleansing, they imprint on your body and in your DNA. And I was going to pass that on to my child. And I was feeling very scared and guilty about that. But then I remembered that whatever it was that my grandmothers had passed to me kind of came alive in the period where I was in the most danger. And it wasn't like they were just passing me trauma. It was like they were transmitting information and knowledge. And I was thinking like, oh, I'm going to pass this very important information on to my child that's like fundamental to our culture and who we are. Um, and in making the film, that was kind of a balm for me because had many moments where I was like, should I even make this? What does it mean to represent violence in this way and such a tragic event? And I had a lot of doubts around whether it was ethical to even do so. Um, but that idea of why were we told these stories when we were children? What was the information that was being passed to us that might serve us later in our lives or in the lives of our kids? And so I think it's made me think more generationally about the work that I make, um, and how trauma is not necessarily just this negative thing, but it's kind of a gift that we've been given, um, that can influence and keep us safe in situations we might not expect to experience. And the last thing I'll say is that the ex the mix of the experience of witnessing what I witnessed and then having a child a few years after has made me think very deeply about what it means to create an archive, what it means to document, because this film that I made is now part of a finite collection of images that will ever be made from this way of life that existed on that land because it's never going to happen again and we don't have access to that place anymore. So there's this quality to the archive that is kind of like a form of resistance, a pushback against erasure. Um, and to step into the role of an archivist or a filmmaker or a documentarian or a storyteller, um, I hold a lot of responsibility in that, and that feels like a vocation, like a calling, like a way to resist the erasure of my culture.
Artists often follow rules and constraints that can offer unique and interesting results. Did you make and follow any rules prior to filming that you stuck with throughout this process?
I don't think there's something that I stuck with through the entire process, A to Z. I think one thing that the after the first year, during the first year of filming this film, I brought a DP with me, because I was feeling very unsure of my own capability to be the person creating images. And I really quickly found that it kind of had to be me holding the camera to be in relationship to these women in a really particular way and kind of just blend into the scenery the way that I wanted to so I could capture something of a more observational nature. Um, and what I found in doing that is that a lot of my decisions as a director were made as a cinematographer. It just became this really organic process where what I was seeing and then what the camera was recording was an extension of the way that I saw these four women. And I felt a lot of power in that. And there was kind of this like organic creation of images and story that mirrored kind of an internal state of mind. Um, the way that I saw them was somehow organically coming out through the images I was creating. Um, so that became kind of maybe a rule or a guiding light for me is that as a director holding a camera, shaped a lot of the language of the film, the relational aspects of it, and like the pacing and style.
So what have you learned as a filmmaker? I guess it's kind of similar to what you just said, but in specifics to filmmaking from this experience that you'll carry into future projects.
Oh man, I mean, I think like the biggest things I've learned are to reject all the things that everyone tells you, like all the ways you're supposed to do it. Um, and it's kind of incredible to make a first feature and step back and learn things about yourself as an artist. And I think a lot of what I've learned is that for me, um, images hold power, relationships are everything. Like documentary film is this kind of entire genre and type of cinema that's based on a relationship to the real world and the representation of reality. And that's so rich. And I think if you're not entering into that thinking about relationships, then something is missing, you know? So for me, that's been a really big piece. The political nature of the stories that we tell. Um, I think for me, the personal is really political. And part of that is because I think living through something like a conflict or a war, it you have that really acute sense that you're living through history and politics are kind of happening around you. And so I think it is to kind of like hold this camera as a microscope up to any person or event, it lifts it up and it gives it importance. And what you choose to make images of is a personal political choice. And I think using that kind of narrative power for our human history to kind of edge towards justice. Not that I'm saying like, oh, I want to make social justice films. I don't think that's it. I think there is a really unique ability that cinema and especially nonfiction cinema has to kind of force us to reflect on the nature of reality and imagine into the future. And so, yeah, I think all of those things have been big lessons for me that I'm so grateful to have had the opportunity to make this work, to reflect on it, to share it with a larger community, like my community outside my community. Um, and yeah, just continue to be humbled by the learning.
Lastly, what's next for you? Are you working on anything else that we should keep an eye out for?
Mm. Oh boy. Yeah, I'm working on like a handful of things. I mean, the main thing related to this is that my next project is actually a creation of an archive from Artsakh, but based on like an archive created from the point of view of the body, that is trying to document embodied memory, which of course makes sense given our whole conversation. I'm also working on a media arts anthology called Portals, which is bringing together a group of artists who are all from the Swana region and mothers or primary caregivers to build out like a speculative fiction world and make multimedia art from it as a way to kind of prioritize the stories of caregivers in speculative work and kind of imagine new futures that are based on care and relationships. Um, And yeah, that one got a Creative Capital Award last year, and we're about to like put together the cohort of artists, and I could not be more excited about that. Um, yeah, and some other little things, but those are the two main ones.
Emily, thank you so much for speaking with me today. And I just want to say that it's really rare that you get the opportunity to speak with a filmmaker who has created something that's hit you hard. I watched this film and was moved so deeply. And then the next day, I was given the opportunity to interview you so I can actually thank you directly. You've made something that is so much bigger than all of its parts. And I hope that it makes its way onto mainstream streaming services and even into universities because it really is a masterful, historic, and cathartic piece of work that deserves so much recognition. So just thank you so much for this.
I'm so grateful to you, Rachel. Thanks for those really kind words and for watching the film. And it was an absolute pleasure. These were wonderful questions and a great conversation.